As they were approaching Jerusalem, they came to Beth-Pagah in the Mount of Olives. Yeshua sent 2 Talmudim with these instructions: "Go into the village ahead of you, and you will immediately find a donkey tethered there with its colt. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, tell them, 'The Lord needs them,' and he will let them go at once." This happened in order to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet. "Say to the daughter of Zion, 'Look, the king is coming to you riding humbly on a donkey and on a colt, the offspring of a beast of burden.'" So the Talmudim went and did as Yeshua had directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt, put their robes on them, and Yeshua sat on them. Crowds of people carpeted the road with their clothing, while others cut branches from trees and spread them on the road. The crowds ahead of him and behind shouted, "Please deliver us!" to the Son of David. "Blessed is he who comes in the name of Adonai. You in the highest heaven, please deliver us!" When he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred. "Who is this?" they asked. And the crowds answered, "This is Yeshua the prophet from Nazareth in Gilgal." Yeshua entered the temple grounds and drove out those who were doing business there, both the merchants and their customers. He upset the desks of the money changers and knocked over the benches of those who were selling pigeons. He said to them, "It has been written, 'My house will be called a house of prayer,' but you are making it into a den of robbers." Blind and lame people came up to him in the temple, and he healed them. But when the head Kohanim and Torah teachers saw the wonderful things he was doing, and the children crying out in the temple, "Please deliver us!" to the Son of David, they were furious. They said to him, "Do you hear what they are saying?" Yeshua replied, "Of course. Haven't you ever read, 'From the mouths of children and infants you have prepared praise for yourself'?" With that, he left them and went outside the city to Beit-Aniah, where he spent the night. The next morning, he went his way back to the city. He felt hungry, spotted a fig tree by the road. He went up to it, but found nothing on it except leaves. He said to it, "May you never bear fruit again." And immediately the fig tree dried up. The Talmudim saw this and were amazed. "How did the fig tree dry up so quickly?" they asked. Yeshua answered them, "Yes, I tell you, if you have trust and don't doubt, you will not only do what was done to this fig tree, but even if you say to this mountain, 'Go and throw yourself into the sea,' it will be done." In other words, you will receive everything you ask for in prayer, no matter what it is, provided you have trust. He went into the temple area, and as he was teaching, the head Kohanim and the elders of the people approached him and demanded, "What shmita do you have that authorizes you to do these things? And who gave you this shmita?" Yeshua answered, "I too will ask you a question. If you answer it, then I will tell you what shmita I do these things. The immersion of Yochanan, where did it come from? From heaven or from a human source?" They discussed it among themselves. "If we say, 'From heaven,' he will say, 'Then why don't you believe him?' But if we say, 'From a human source,' we are afraid of the people, for they all regard Yochanan as a prophet." So they answered Yeshua, "We don't know." And he replied, "Then I won't tell you what shmita I do these things. But give me your opinion. A man has 2 sons. He went to the first and said, 'Son, go and work today in the harvest.' He answered, 'I don't want to,' but later changed his mind and went. The father went to the other son, said the same thing. The one answered, 'I will, sir,' but he didn't go. Which of the 2 did what his father wanted? The first?" They replied, "That's right." Yeshua said to them, "I tell you that the tax collectors and prostitutes are going into the kingdom of God ahead of you. For Yochanan came to show For Yochanan came to you showing the path of righteousness, and you wouldn't trust him. The tax collectors and prostitutes trusted him. But you, even after you saw this, didn't change your minds later and trust him. Now listen to another parable. There was a farmer who planted a vineyard. He put a wall around it, dug a pit for a winepress, and built a tower. Then he rented it to the tenants and left. When harvest time came, he sent his servants to the tenants to collect his share of the crop. But the tenants seized his servants. This one they beat up, that one they killed, another they stoned. So he sent some other servants, more than the first group, and they did the same thing. Finally, he sent his son, saying, "My son they will respect." But when the tenants saw the son, they said to each other, "This is the heir. Come, let's kill him and take his inheritance." So they grabbed him, threw him out of the vineyard, and killed him. Now when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those tenants? They answered him, "He will viciously destroy those vicious men and rent out the vineyard to other tenants who will give him his share of the crop when it's due." Yeshua said to them, "Haven't you ever read in the Tanakh, the very rock which the builders rejected has become the cornerstone? This has come from Adonai, and in our eyes it is amazing. Therefore I tell you that the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to the kind of people that will produce its fruit." As the head Kohanim and the Prushim listened to his stories, they saw that he was speaking about them. But when they set about to arrest him, they were afraid of the crowds, because the crowds considered him a prophet. Yeshua again used parables in speaking to them. The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding feast for his son. But when he sent his slaves to summon the invited guests to the wedding, they refused to come. So he sent some more slaves, instructing them to tell the guests, "Look, I have prepared my banquet. I've slaughtered my bulls and my fattened cattle, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding." But they weren't interested and went off, one to his farm, another to his business, and the rest grabbed his slaves, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was furious, sent his soldiers who killed those murderers and burned down their city. Then he said to his slaves, "Well, the wedding feast is ready, but the ones who were invited didn't deserve it. So go out to the street corners and invite to the banquet as many as you find." The slaves went out to the streets, gathered all the people they could find, the bad along with the good, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. Now when the king came in to look at the guests, he saw there was a man who wasn't dressed for a wedding. So he asked him, "Friend, how did you get in here without wedding clothes?" The man was speechless. And the king said to the servants, Bind him hand and foot, and throw him outside in the dark. In that place there will be wail and grind their teeth, for many are invited, but few are chosen." Then the Prushim went away and put together a plan to trap Yeshua with his own words. They sent him some of their Talmudim and some members of Herod's party. They said, "Rabbi, we know that you tell the truth and really teach what God's way is. You aren't concerned with what other people think about you, since you pay no attention to a person's status. So tell us your opinion. Does Torah permit paying taxes to a Roman emperor or not?" Yeshua, however, knowing their malicious intent, said, "You hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin used to pay the tax." They brought him a denarius, and he asked them, "Whose name and picture are these?" "Emperors," they replied. Yeshua said to them, "Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and give to God what belongs to God." On hearing this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. Then that same day, some Zadokim came to him. They are the ones who say there is no such thing as resurrection, so they put to him a Shelah. "Rabbi, Moshe said, if a man dies childless, his brother must marry his widow and have children to preserve the man's family line. There were 7 brothers. The first one, married and then died. Since he had no children, he left his widow to his brother. The same thing happened to the second brother, and the third, and finally all 7. After them all, the woman died. Now in the resurrection of the 7, whose wife will she be? For they all married her. Yeshua answered them, the reason you go astray is that you are both ignorant of the Tanakh and the power of God. For in the resurrection, neither men nor women will marry, rather, they will be like angels in heaven. And as for whether the dead are resurrected, haven't you read what God said to you? I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Yaakov. He is God not only of the dead, but of the living. He is God not of the dead, but of the living. When the crowds heard how he taught, they were astounded. But when the Prushim learned that he had silenced the Zudakim, they got together. And one of them, who was a Torah expert, asked the Shelah to trap him. Rabbi, which of the mitzvot in the Torah is the most important? He told them, you are to love Adonai your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. This is the greatest and most important mitzvot, and a second is similar to it. You are to love your neighbor as yourself. All of the Torah and the prophets are dependent on these 2 mitzvot. Then, turning to the assembled Prushim, Yeshua put a Shelah to them. Tell me your view concerning the Messiah. Whose son is he? They said to him, David's. Then how is it, he asked them, that David, inspired by the Spirit, calls him Lord when he says, Adonai said to my Lord, sit here at my right hand until I put your enemies at your feet. If David thus calls him Lord, how is he his son? No one could think of anything to say in reply, and from that day on, no one dared put to him another Shelah.